Gen Z is excited by what's new and popular. अगर आलिया भट्ट ने वो अनारकली कुर्ती पहनी है, that is what they want.
Does it mean they don't care that much about the brand?
So there is a lot of conversation on how Gen Z wants work-life balance, probably not the best set of employees to have, but you need that perspective in your team.
What's the difference between people who go to Flipkart versus Myntra?
There were just 3-4 women in the entire room, and there is a conversation on how Blinkit delivers orders, and only the women in the room knew that it actually breaks orders. Why did only the women in the room know? So as Flipkart, we have always stood for brands at value, right? We will give you the established brands like a Louis Philippe, Allen Solly, Levi, etc. at great value, but that was not resonating with Gen Z.
What do you look for in hiring? This question will be helpful for our audience in terms of knowing what Flipkart looks for. So, Saloni, Flipkart has been a leader in e-commerce for more than a decade. What do you think makes it tick?
So, we recently found out Gen Z is the largest generation ever to live in India. It's a 377 million largest generation. Yeah. And
is it a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a good thing. It's a problem we have to solve for. Yeah.
Okay.
And they're already having an outsized influence on e-commerce. They're driving 25% of the e-commerce GMV, and through their moms and dads, they're influencing 80% of e-commerce GMV.
Overall.
Overall,
Okay.
80%. So very, very huge number. Yeah. And then we figured there are a few shopping behaviors that are very pronounced in Gen Z that we need to solve for. Now, has Amazon already sort of figured that out and is solving for Gen Z? No, right? We have this understanding of the Indian context that we're able to understand these problems and solve for them and bring be the first to the market with the solutions, right?
Okay.
That is what I mean when I say we have an understanding of Indian context that a competition does not have.
Mostly because we are an India-based company.
Yes. Yeah.
So with day in, day out, we are exposed to the behaviors,
Correct.
The expectations of the audience around us.
Correct. And it's also a very relatable context, right? Like I have also worked before in established organizations like a Microsoft. I remember I was building a sports app, and I was solving for games like NFL, NBA, NHL, which are not like, as kids, those are not the games we have played, right?
Yeah.
So no context, right? So you're solving without context.
Yeah.
And I can only do so well, right? Versus here, I know the Indian context, right? And hence my ability to solve.
Are you probably feel like you're solving for yourself or people like you?
Yeah. As product managers, we're sort of taught to think we are not the customer. But it's just very easy for me to relate to the Indian context, right?
Yes.
And that's the distinction I'm drawing. Yeah.
And when you talked about speed as being an advantage,
yes,
Flipkart is massive now.
Yeah.
Do you think at this scale at which Flipkart operates, it still has the advantage of speed compared to other startups out there?
So I have actually been at Flipkart twice. I was at Flipkart in 2015-16, and now I am at Flipkart right now. Back then, Flipkart had just sort of transitioned into an established organization, and it did not know how to operate like one. So back then, things were really slow, right? But now we have actually figured how to operate like a large organization. And we are still an India-only setup, right? Hence, I think at this point in time, I feel we are very nimble. I know of how things go on in established organizations. The kind of things that it will take them 3 to 6 months to build, we are able to actually ship in 3 weeks, right? We're still shipping products from concept to launch in 3 weeks or less also.
Can you give an example of a recent product that you launched in 3 to 4 weeks and what made it work?
What made it work? 3 to 4. Okay, so let's talk about, I was talking about Gen Z earlier. So what we figured was Gen Z is looking for trends at value, right? They are very excited by what's new and popular. They are influenced by creators on social media, right? So if a creator on social media says color block shoes is the latest trend, they want that, right? So as Flipkart, we actually have to pivot our discovery systems a lot more on those trends, right? So when a Gen Z comes and looks for color block heels or color block shoes, I should be able to understand what the Gen Z wants, show that trend in my slate, and the entire journey has to sort of pivot, right? So we figured that, okay, our search today doesn't understand trends. We have to problem solve that. So from that, understanding that this is a problem that needs to be solved, we were able to quickly get to a point where we were able to curate trends and then map selection to trends and start highlighting that in the discovery funnel, right?
Okay.
So this entire launch took us hardly a month, right? So that is like still how nimble we are.
What are some of the biggest consumer behavior trends Flipkart has identified recently?
So I think I'll pick on the Gen Z conversation that we were having. As I was mentioning, largest generation ever to live in India, and the shopping behaviors are very different, right? So I'll talk about a couple of things that we have observed. One, and I think this is also something we touched on before, Gen Z is excited by what's new and popular, right? Agar Alia Bhatt ne wo anarkali kurti pehni hai, that is what they want, right?
Does it mean they don't care that much about the brand?
Exactly, right? So as Flipkart, we have always stood for brands at value, right? We will give you the established brands like a Louis Philippe, Allen Solly, Levi, etc. at great value. But that was not resonating with Gen Z, right? What they wanted was the Alia cut kurti or the oversized t-shirt at great value because their wallets are small, right? So they want to optimize the number of trends they're able to purchase within that smaller wallet. So as Flipkart, what we started doing then was, instead of selection and discovery being brands at value, we have actually pivoted to trends at value.
Okay.
Yeah. Second, we figured Gen Z is very, very influenced by creators on social media. In some shape and form, creator is the new search. वहीं पे discovery हो रही है, right? इस creator ने ये बोला है तो अब ये चाहिए. So we started, so Flipkart was actually not working as much with influencer ecosystem earlier. This year itself, we have actually started partnering heavily with the influencer ecosystem to increase our share of voice in social media. We are doing things like Flipkart hauls, etc. a lot more now. Third, we also realize they prefer, they are basically visually inspired. They prefer immersive experiences. Yeah. So for Gen Z, we have actually done a video first shopping experience.
Okay.
You go to our homepage, right from homepage to product page, there is a lot of video content now to inspire intent, to help you understand how this product will look actually when someone wears it, on the side, everything. We have also built a video only shopping destination called Play to inspire intent. It is a bold bet. It is something like an Instagram where customers can come browse through videos that are created by influencers and see if something inspires them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that on Flipkart because I don't use Flipkart for shopping as such. I mostly use Myntra, which brings me to the next question here. What's the difference between people who go to Flipkart versus Myntra? Because this consumer behavior you're talking about for the Gen Zs, that should be across platforms, right? But so far I have noticed Myntra is still talking a lot about brands versus Flipkart.
So I think the first thing you have to understand is Myntra is a destination for high affluent India. So India is not just one India. I think a lot of people would have told you this. India is many
India 1,
Indias.
India 2, India 3, India 4.
There is a middle affluent, there is a low affluent, and there is a high affluent, right?
Where do you put Gen Zs there?
Gen Z is across the spectrum. Gen Z is actually an age phenomena, right? So when you do consumer cohorts, one is by affluence, other is by age, third is by gender.
Okay.
Yeah. So Gen Z, and which will answer the question you were actually just asking, but just bear with me. Yeah. So first, I think Myntra is a high affluent destination. It's and hence you will see a lot more branded play. Flipkart has actually historically solved for middle India, and that too middle India millennials. Millennial is again an age play, right? Now with the advent of Gen Z, everyone has to solve for it. It's just that the Gen Z that Myntra will see will be the high affluent Gen Z. The Gen Z that we will see and we have a right to win also is the mid affluent Gen Z.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's where it is no cannibalization that's going on. The second point you mentioned was Myntra is still see brands. Myntra has actually created a separate destination called Forward for Gen Z, and they will identify you are a Gen Z. They will take you to that destination. They will target you with that content on social media, right? Maybe they have figured that you are not a Gen Z, and hence they're not bothering you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, Saloni, I also noticed you are kind of a champion for diversity and inclusion at Flipkart, particularly as a women leader. I want to understand, do you think it really helps with building the right kind of products? If yes, then how?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example actually. We were in a meeting and we were discussing about our latest offering, which is Minutes, right? It's primarily grocery. And there were just 3-4 women in the entire room. And we were actually...
Out of how many?
this would easily be more than 20 people.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is leadership. Yeah. And there is a conversation on how Blinkit or one of the competitors delivers orders. And only the women in the room knew that it actually breaks orders into two. I don't know if you know. Now they have this concept of a store that is nearby and a store that could be farther. Multiple stores could be mapped to you.
Yes.
Right? Why did only the women in the room know? Because they're the only ones who are ordering groceries. And you would totally not have this perspective if you did not have women in the room.
Yes.
Right? So women, I think what you have to realize is there are things that women do, and because of which they bring in their unique perspectives. Right?
Yes.
50% of India is women, right? So if you are not including that perspective in your product thought process, you're basically solving for half of India only.
Yeah.
Do you want to be at that disadvantage? If yes, then please go ahead and not bother about diversity. Otherwise, for your business also, the right thing to do is to actually have enough and more diversity representation, not just women, right? Diversity comes in all shapes and forms. Right now, we are actually trying to have Gen Z in our team. Right? Because we want that perspective. That's the next set of consumers that are actually going to shape e-commerce.
Yeah.
And if we don't have their perspective, how do we build for them? Right? So I think diversity comes in all shapes and forms, and you need it to be able to build the right product. Yeah.
Very nice. I think the example was spot on.
Yeah.
And that is just one example. There could be many other scenarios where a particular segment of the user base is your primary customer, and you don't have that representation in these kind of
to be able to solve well.
Yeah, you will end up shipping half-baked products basically.
Yeah.
And then because you don't have that diverse perspective in your team, but the other company does, and if that other company is your competitor, you are toast basically.
Yeah.
Because speed is the name of the game in startups.
So there is a lot of conversation on how Gen Z wants work-life balance, probably not the best set of employees to have, but you need that perspective in your team, right? So hence, I think there is a certain cost you probably have to pay for diversity, but it is the right choice for your business in the long term.
And as PMs, I think you can always do a good trade-off analysis there,
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that brings me to the next question, which is more about PM hiring, whether it is at Flipkart or whether it is in your team, anywhere you have worked at. But this specific question is, what's non-negotiable for a PM candidate at Flipkart, and what do you look for in hiring? This question will be helpful for our audience in terms of knowing what Flipkart looks for, because what I have seen in my experience, it actually differs quite a lot from company to company.
I do agree with you. I think having worked at Microsoft, Amazon, Jumbotail and Flipkart, the interview processes are very different. But there are a few key competencies I feel that each product-driven organization looks for. And maybe I'll now speak from more Flipkart context. So we actually evaluate for 4 competencies. One is product thinking, which is essentially your product. Some companies call it product sense. Some companies call it product strategy, right? What we're really looking to understand here is, are you goal-driven, right? Do you start from a goal? Then are you customer first? Are you customer obsessed, right? Are you able to understand the customer and his or her needs? Third is, are you data-driven? Are you leveraging data to make your choices? Fourth is, are you structured in your thought process, right? You started from a goal, you have to understand the customer, you have to figure what are the right success metrics, etc. Are you going about it in a structured way? And last but not the least, there is also are you innovative enough in your solution approaches, right? So those are a few things which sort of encompass you being able to come up with a holistic product strategy. And depending on the level, how you evaluate it sort of changes. What you look for also changes. But if I were to just summarize, it is, I think, goal orientation, customer orientation, metric orientation, and structured product thinking.
All of this as part of product strategy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then there is a second interview we do, which is on problem solving. This is where we go deep into data-driven decision making. We will give you a problem. Let's say YouTube's DAO is down. How will you go about it, right? So we actually expect you again to be structured, right? You are coming up with hypotheses, you are using data to validate, disvalidate hypotheses. And then you come up with solves. Here again, we look for innovation. So in some shape and form, these interviews are similar, but the kind of problems you will be given are very, very different. Here is a specific problem solving we will ask you to do. And these two are the most important interviews for a Flipkart product manager.
Okay.
Yeah. There are two other interviews we do. One is tech orientation. The fourth one is business orientation.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a reasonable amount of understanding of technology for you to effectively work with your engineering counterparts.
What is the reasonable amount of knowledge in terms of Flipkart's expectations?
See, you should be able to come up with a high level architecture. You should be able to understand how API interactions, etc. will happen. That is the level of understanding we expect.
So the very basics. They are not required to know how to code.
No.
They don't have to ship anything that way.
Yeah.
But they should know how these different systems work.
Correct.
How these different interfaces, APIs, and all that work.
Correct.
Which is also something we actually recommended to Airtribe. Like even for people who are getting into product, we have a dedicated module for tech for PMs because whether people like it or not, they will have to work with engineers.
Yes.
And to be able to work with engineers, to have their respect, at least the basics have to be there.
Absolutely.
Understood.
Yeah. And I think that is where PMs have to influence without impact as well, right? And unless you have that basic understanding, you will not be able to exert the right amount of influence.
Okay, so that's more of a technical interview.
Yeah.
Where you look for technical orientation.
Correct. And the fourth one is business orientation, right? Where a business person will evaluate if you're able to orient yourself towards a business, right? Obviously, you're not the one who's leading that conversation. But when the business person is trying to explain a problem to you, are you able to understand in all the prior contexts you have worked with, were you able to understand the business context, right? So that's the last round.
Can you give an example to explain this fourth point?
So for example, we are in the e-commerce business, right?
Yeah.
Do you understand the domain? Do you understand the competition in the domain? Do you understand how the business even works?
That means the person who is interviewing with Flipkart, they will have to go through a lot of stuff related to e-commerce, the industry, and your positioning. So that is the preparation that they have to do. That means...
Yeah, so there are two ways to go about it, right? One, you have already some experience. Did you understand the business in that context, right? Like for example, I'm working for a SaaS company. Do you understand SaaS as a business?
Okay,
right?
So they will be evaluated based on how much is their understanding of their business.
Their business.
Because what I'm finding a little unfair is if somebody is coming from an entirely different industry and expecting them to know so much about your industry is very difficult.
Yeah, so very, very fair, right? Which is where we will ask you proactively probably if you understand the e-commerce context. Now, e-commerce is still, I find to be very relatable.
Yeah.
But if you're not comfortable, we are happy to evaluate through past experiences you have and your business understanding in those contexts.
Understood.
Yeah.
And when you say business understanding, do you mean whether they are aware of the products that they built and what business impact it had? Or there is something else we are
How does the business even work, right? For example, I am building a SaaS tool, but do you understand how SaaS gets sold, right? Do you understand how the business life cycles are, right?
So it kind of completes the loop of how things are built and also how things are sold.
Correct.
That whole
exactly. How do we make money?
There.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Understood. Yeah. What advice would you have for people who want to get into product for the first time, knowing what you know now, and also knowing things have changed so much in 2025 with AI doing so much of the heavy lifting?
I think the one thing, so the craft of product management, definitely I think you can be more efficient now with AI. But what a product manager brings to the table, I don't think AI is still sort of there yet and would be there even few years down the line, right? The ideas have to come from the PM only.
Yeah.
PM only has to talk to the customers and figure what will work, what will not work, right?
But they can still process all the data that they collect from the customers a little faster.
Absolutely.
Because of AI.
Absolutely.
That's what you're saying, right?
Correct, right? So maybe you can just be more efficient at what you're doing, leveraging the technology, and that's where you should absolutely understand AI and what it can do for you. Not knowing that, I think it just puts you at a disadvantage, right? You are spending
so PMs are safe.
I personally think
PMs are safe.
It's a creative field. Okay. I generally feel all creative fields are safe, right?
So so that was one part of the question. Second part was, what advice would you have for people who want to break into product management now?
Advice to early stage PMs has always been to optimize for learning, not to optimize for titles, not to optimize for money. Because I think the growth curve is typically a hockey stick, right? You grow gradually and then you grow suddenly,
Hmm.
right? So early years of your career, you should generally optimize for learning. So if you have 2-3 choices, see where you will have the best learning and go there.
Mhm.
The other advice is diversify, which is essentially don't sort of already become a domain expert,
Hmm.
right? There is, at early stages, there is very little value placed in domain expertise, right? You are sort of valued for your raw smarts, your competencies a lot more than domain expertise. Domain expertise becomes important in later stages, right? So optimize for learning and diversify. Those are the two
Okay.
things I will say.
Got it. I hope the audience finds it useful, because a good part of our audience is aspiring PMs. And I think two things that you said, both are relevant in the sense, first, many people are afraid about AI taking over jobs, but I keep saying at Airtribe myself, product management is not one of those. It will only get more important when it's easier to build things,
Yeah.
but what to build will continue to be as hard as ever.
Yeah.
In fact, it will become more important because everyone can build.
Yeah, exactly.
If everyone can build, then
Which is where the efficiency point comes in, right? Now, as a product manager, you can actually prototype on your own. There are clouds, there are products that will actually allow you to prototype on your own, right? So it just allows you to be a lot more efficient, I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do a small rapid fire round. Okay. You just have to answer in a word or two, or yes or no. What's one hard truth about being a product leader?
Less power.
Okay. Favorite PM framework?
First principles.
Nice. A book that you're reading right now?
Becoming by Michelle Obama.
Okay. Your favorite hobby?
Dancing.
Nice. The greatest product manager who ever lived?
Steve Jobs.
So with that, we come to the end of this episode of the Airtribe podcast. See you in the next one.